Today I'm going to talk about how to outline your novel. So this is not the only way to outline your novel, or probably the way you should even outline your novel, but this is actually just going to be about the way I did it, the way I outlined mine. And I'm working on mine right now, so it's not published. I'm just kind of getting started on it, and I'm going to talk over the course of these videos just about what that process has been like. I did not go to school to be a writer or anything like that, so I'm sure you'll hear me talk about that more and more. But I just kind of want to take people along on this process. So today we're going to talk about the first thing that I did, which was create an outline. So outlining for me, I guess some people say there's multiple kinds of writers. There's like the people that just write whatever comes to their head and they kind of build the story from there. That's not something I could do. I had to create an outline. I mean, I guess I could have gone that way, and I've even tried to get creative and write down whatever's coming to my mind, but there's no structure to it. And one of the things that I like to read are big epics, and I don't know how you ever do that without outlining. George R.R. Martin says that he doesn't do a lot of outlining. He says he's more of like a gardener and just writes and this lets the story come to him, and that is not something I understand. I don't know how anybody could do that. So I kind of did want to sit down and write a big novel series, and I wanted it to be an epic world, high fantasy, and I just didn't know how I would ever do that without writing down my outline. So I'm going to kind of go through just the quick steps. There's 5 steps that I do. The first thing is writing out the chapters. So you don't always know, your whole book when you sit down to start this process. I mean, it's the very first thing you're doing, you're writing an outline. It took me a long time, probably longer than it should. But in my mind, I was able to kind of visualize where I want the characters to start and where I want them to finish. The first thing I really did from there is just say, how long is this book going to be, this first book? So I knew that I wanted my book to be a certain length. I knew about how many chapters I wanted, and you kind of have to think to yourself, I mean, okay, chapters. What is a chapter? It's really a break in the story. I mean, you're talking about something, and then there's the chapter ending, and then you switch gears, or maybe there's a passage of time, or there's kind of a resolution to your little mini story within your novel or within your story. So I kind of knew how many chapters I want. There's just a couple examples. Books don't have to have chapters. You could have a book with no chapters and it would just be hard to read. I mean, think about when you sit down to read. Sometimes you are like, okay, I'm falling asleep. I'm just going to get to the end of this chapter. Or you get to an end of a chapter and you're excited and you're like, I'm going to read another chapter. But I kind of break up books when I'm reading by the chapters. Well, you can go the other route and have like 2-page chapters have 100 chapters, I've read books like that. I absolutely love Bret Easton Ellis's books. The Rules of Attraction is one of my favorite books, and it's like 2 pages for every chapter. And it's kind of exciting. I mean, every 2 pages there's something different. There's another character perspective. You're totally switching gears. But I knew I didn't want my book to be like that. So I kind of knew how long I wanted it to be. And then you kind of divide that up. You know how many pages you want in a chapter. And it's like, okay, I knew how many chapters I was going to have. So you kind of break those up, write out what the chapter is going to be about, figure out who's going to be in your chapter, and you can kind of spend as much or as little time on that as you want. Within each chapter, the next number 2 would be scenes. So you ever think about a chapter that you're reading? Usually you don't just get right into the thick of it. There's other things that happen, like for example, if you're reading Harry Potter, and it's the troll chapter, or it's like, I don't know, it's like a Quidditch chapter per se. That's a better example. So you're going to be reading about the Quidditch championship. Well, it doesn't just go right into the Quidditch championship. It's like, how do you get to the Quidditch World Cup? Or if it's just like a regular game that Harry is in, they talk about all the things leading up to it, like Harry giving Ron the Felix potion so he thinks he's lucky. And I mean, there's just so many things, like they're having lunch, they're having dinner in the Great Hall, and then maybe they have class, and maybe Snape comes along and tells them that you're got to go to detention and you can't make it. So Then you get to the thick part of the chapter, like the main part, and that is going to be the bulk of your chapter, but there's going to be several scenes that occur before that. So what I like to do is look at my chapter, I kind of know who's going to be in it, and then I write down little scenes inside of it. Now, I'm not trying to say that that's like what you have to follow, but I do know that I want these scenes to be in there to some degree. And maybe I leave myself a little note here and there, and I just kind of go down maybe 5 or 6 scenes in each chapter. Okay, so step 3 is description. So I go back through those scenes and I write a description. And I try to give myself some notes, realizing that I might have 20 chapters and, 7 times 20, like 140 scenes. So I'm writing these scenes, and I know that the book's going to be 300 pages or something like that. I mean, when I get to like chapter 15, 5th scene in that chapter, I am not going to remember what I'm thinking about today. I mean, that's one thing that you just have to, I think if you've never written anything like this, like you've never tried to tackle a story this big, and then you're just trying out for the first time, which is exactly what I'm going through. One thing I had to realize is you're not going to remember the ideas that you get in your head when you're getting inspired to write. So you can write them down and you can leave yourself a little note, but the truth is, if you don't actually just flat out write out what you want, what you visualize in your head today, you're not going to remember. So when I write these descriptions, I write it all out. I write exactly what I'm thinking, what I want to happen. So-and-so is meeting with so-and-so, and so on, here's a good place for this type of thing to happen. And there's more than just like events happening, here's a good place to reflect on the character's growth or something like that. I give myself little hints. Okay, so then once I have all the scenes written out, I didn't even know I was going to do this, but I actually went to start writing, and I was kind of just reviewing my chapters and scenes and reading the descriptions, and I was getting excited, like, okay, it's going to be time to write. And as I was looking at it, I was like realizing that some of my chapters and scenes were over the course of one day. Like maybe from one chapter to the end of the chapter, I'd written all of my ideas in one day. And then I realized the same thing for the next chapter and so on. But I know that the book overall is supposed to take place over the course of an entire year. So the passage of time is something I feel like I could do a whole nother video on, and I don't want this to be too long, but the passage of time is just something that you don't necessarily think about when you're sitting down and writing out all of your ideas, but it's really important. There's like a little buzz ball or something. I'm afraid of bugs. I thought that was a bug. But there's like the passage of time, you just have to realize like, okay, about a quarter of the way through my book, well, I should be a quarter of the way through the year. And it doesn't have to be like that, but I kind of know that I want my book to be like that, and I realized that a quarter of the way through my chapters, like no time had gone by. So I went back through and included into my outline the passage of time. So that way when I go back and I'm writing, I know, oh, it's been a week here, it's been a couple hours, it's the next day, it's been 2 weeks, maybe a lot of time has gone by. So that's just something to think about. The last thing that I did is I went through and I looked at everything and I wrote themes. So I kind of know like bullying, coming of age, romance, curiosity, adventure. I know that I want these themes to be throughout my book, and I actually went through and put, here's a good place for this theme, this theme, this theme, so on. And I think that it's wonderful to just have in your head that you read this book and you're like, oh, this was a great coming of age story or whatever, and you think that the author maybe you don't know if they intended to do it, and maybe they didn't, but I think that for me, since I'm starting out, if I want there to be a message to my book, I'm going to have to intentionally put it in there. And so I kind of just write down the places where I want to put that in. So, okay, so this is going to be my first video. I am going to put a link to my blog under the video, and you can go check it out. It's Stringer Studios, just like the YouTube channel. If you have any questions, please leave me comments, like the video. I'm just getting started, so anything like that would be very encouraging and helpful. I appreciate you taking the time to watch the video. Thank you.